So I talked earlier about looking for ways to create Krell patches that wouldn't always top out at the maximum voltage every single time that the rise finishes and then begins to fall. And so then I started working on what I like to call encapsulated Krell patches, and that's what we're looking at now. So now I'm using maths as two separate Krell-like function generators. I have the original Krell patch that we set up using the Vulkan modulator to control with its two LFOs to control rise on one side, fall on the other side, and that part of the Krell patch is what's opening our filter, our VCA, and modulating our wave shaper. So that's what we're actually listening to. But then what I've done is I've set up a similar Krell function on the other side of maths. In this case, I'm using a Dalac modulator, and I've got it running fairly slowly, outputting two separate sine waves that are controlling rise and fall on channel 1 of maths. And it's outputting a similar but slower looking Krell function. We can see it if we turn our attention to the scope as the red trace. So the red trace is the output from maths channel number 1, and we're not really hearing it do very much. What we're listening to is the green trace, which is maths channel number 4, and that's driving our audio. So then what purpose do I have channel number 1 set up for? Well, that's the interesting part. I'm running channel 1 of maths into an IntelliGel Linux VCA. So I'm using that, I'm using channel 1 Krell function to open and close a VCA, and then I'm sending the output of channel 4, which is our original Krell function, through that VCA. So if you keep your eye on the scope, you'll see that I've now created a Krell voltage that doesn't always reach the top of its range. And in fact, if you watch the red trace and the green trace, you'll see that there's a correlation. The higher that the red trace gets, then the higher that the green trace is able to be, since the red trace is controlling a VCA that's passing that voltage. This then gives us a very interesting musical setup in that now not only do we have different articulations of our original Krell, and remember that there's all kinds of ways that we can shape those articulations, but now we're actually controlling how much of it we hear. My reasoning behind this is I very much like the idea of creating a little burst of phrasing, like a little flutter of notes that's almost as if the instrument was alive and performing its own special kind of unearthly Krell music. And like a real performer is changing its maximum volume and playing little phrases that follow that. The beauty of this system is that we've just stretched out one side of the Krell function, and we're using it to make those little changes by opening and closing that VCA. So it's actually taking a longer stretched out Krell and imprinting that control voltage onto the control voltage of our shorter audible side of the Krell patch. So I've been making these for years, and I've done all kinds of interesting things with them, and I've looked at different ways that I can then use them as parts of a polyphonic patch. So I might have a melody line like we're listening to now that is fed from our original Krell, and then I might be using the same control voltage that I'm using to open and close the VCA to bring in things like chordal parts or to modulate other parts of the patch so that I've got more voices going on, or they could be accompaniment voices. And of course, we don't have to stop at 2. We can keep going. I can then take this output that that we're seeing in the green trace, and I can patch that into another VCA and then have that controlled by another Krell function generator, so that I've got 3 of them in a line controlling that final Krell that we're actually listening to. So then what happens and what sort of effects do we get if we start to change some of the timing? In order to make this patch audible, I very purposefully have channel 1 of maths playing the slow, drawn-out Krell, and I've got the quicker articulations coming from channel 4, which is the side that we're actually listening to. But it doesn't have to be that way. I can flip it around the other way. If I decrease rise and fall, then my controlling voltage, I'm getting pretty up into audio right there. Can be a lot quicker. And the audio side, the Krell function that we're listening to as it controls our oscillator, can be a lot longer. And you'll notice, of course, that this has a bouncing ball aspect to it, because in fact it's that kind of nested control that appears in the classic maths bouncing ball patch. So we're hearing the red trace running fast and imprinting its control over the VCA on the final output of the green trace that's driving the audio portion of the patch. Now, for ease of use and simplicity in terms of demonstrating this, I'm using a VCA. But you certainly don't have to use a VCA. I could go back to using the polarizer that I was using, so that I've got a Krell control voltage that's not only controlling the level of the audio portion of the Krell, but is actually flipping it and inverting it as well. But we can also use other types of real-time functions, things like minimum and maximum, sum difference. There's all kinds of different utilities that we could use that would give us an output from those 2 voltages that would be useful in a performance such as this. Now I'm going to try to tune them to be of similar speed. Essentially, we end up with a never-ending playground of interesting control voltages that we can put to use. And keep in mind that really, I haven't delved too much into what it is that I'm doing with these voltages. I'm just running a basic sine wave into a wave shaper and then into a low-pass gate. But we can do all kinds of interesting things with them. and then correlate the two different sides of our Krell voltages to different parts of the timbre of the patch. And of course, in the same way that I was able to make changes and modulate in real time the Krell voltages and the output of the Krell by changing either the amount or the speed of the LFOs that are controlling it, I could do the same with this patch, choosing parts of the patch that I would insert controllers and then make changes either to the speed of the LFOs controlling either side and either rise or fall of the two Krell functions, or changing the gain, which really makes the biggest difference, where I'm controlling the amount that I'm modulating the maths functions. Now, in an effort to make this demonstration easier to hear and easier to understand, I have purposefully increased the minimum amount that the Linux VCA will close. So I'm not letting it close all the way, and then I'm guaranteed to at least get a little bit of maths channel 4 Krell function out to control the actual sound producing parts of the patch. But I can change that. I've set it now so that the VCA will close completely and will open fully, provided that the voltage on the red trace is high enough. And so now we'll see a wider range of volumes, but we may see parts where the melody is a little bit silent. So it might be busy doing something, but we may not get to hear it. Next time around, we're going to take a look at some different modules that can help get us to this place with this level of control in easier ways, and giving us more outputs so that we can start to add more voices to our single monophonic line to produce something that's more like the PolyKrells that I am such a fan of. I hope you've enjoyed this series so far, and we'll see you soon. If you like what you've heard and you want to support me as I continue to make music and make videos using modular synths, please consider supporting me on Patreon. You can find my Patreon in the link in the description and up on the screen. Thank you so much for listening.